What's up, everyone? It's Jeff. Up next on the Second Chance podcast, we have Patrick Casey, and Patrick is he's an advanced registered nurse practitioner with over 22 years of continuous sobriety. You're going to hear about this, and you're going to hear about the work he's doing now um, inside of substance abuse treatment areas, and just the message that he has. He's the thing I think y'all find, and about Patrick, and we talk about this, is he's unique. He's not someone who hasn't dipped his toes into the negative side of drug abuse. He is a recovering addict, cleaning sober for 22 years. So the perspective that someone in this situation who's been on both sides, I think is immeasurable. And I think even going back to some of the times when I was in a rut or struggling, was trying to find a like-minded individual that I could connect with, someone who could walk me through kind of that darkness that I was in, just like what Patrick does with recovering addicts. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's someone that I highly recommend. If you have a friend who's struggling with drug addiction, make sure that we connect him with him. There's not enough Patricks in the world compared to what we see on the negative side of how our addictive drug culture affects our communities and our friends. So let me know what you think. You're going to know someone who needs to hear this one. So I appreciate you sharing it with them. And ultimately, Patrick's one of those guys that transformed his life from being a drug dealer into being a hope dealer. So let me know what you think. Can't wait to hear. All right, team. On to today on the Second Chance podcast, we have Patrick Casey, a board-certified, advanced registered nurse practitioner with over 21 years of continuous sobriety. Congratulations, man. That's just in the intro itself. I wanted to pause. 21 years is a long time.
Well, we have to correct that. It's 22 now.
22 years. Yeah.
Just had an anniversary. Yeah.
It's awesome. Patrick's journey from overcoming heroin addiction at a young age to dedicating his career to helping others find their way back from the darkest depths is nothing short of inspiring. He works extensively in substance abuse treatment, including with first responders and veterans, and is now building a coaching practice to guide men facing anger, depression, and frustration. Patrick believes that no one is ever too far gone to help make a comeback. Join us as he shares his story, his insights, and his mission to empower others to break free from self-destructive patterns. It's amazing. Just reading that, learning a little about you ahead of that, man. That's a lot to overcome. A lot of people don't get to have this conversation, Patrick.
Dude, no, thanks for having me, Jeff. And yeah, if you knew me 22 years ago, you'd be saying, not that guy, not Patrick.
Yeah. All right. So 22 years ago, where are you at? How old are you? Give me an idea.
Yeah. So I got clean at 19. I'm 41 now. So
Yeah.
that's how that math works out. I always, I look young, so I always joke with people. I always tell them I got sober at 12 or something like that.
Yeah. If I cut my beard, I go back to baby face.
Yep. I had a beard just like that. It was about this big last March. I got rid of it. Yep.
All right. So in 22 years ago, that's about what, 2002?
August of 2002. Yes, sir.
What are you in Florida during this time? I'm
Georgia.
All right. So I just wanted to, just for perspective, I wanted to, I'll tell you where I was at. I was working as a task force officer, a local DEA. So I'm on this side of the enforcement side of, and you're on this side. So
you guys were watching us very closely. Yeah. And what's funny is, after I went off to rehab, a local newspaper came out in Augusta, Georgia, that said like 63 street level dealers and other people were all busted in this like 1 or 2 year ongoing investigation. And I was like, holy, a lot of the guys I bought from, sold to. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing how I just kind of skated through that.
And I'm curious, I got some questions, but we're totally off my script right now because I'm interested. And I want to tee us up here and kind of set the tone. And for a lot of folks who don't know this is also around the time when we have Oxycontin, when we have synthetic opioids that are being introduced into our market. So I'm curious, as we talk, if how that affected you.
That was me. That was me in high school, was the Oxycontin. And it was, we'll get into it at some point maybe, and then it was introduced to me, this heroin thing. And a friend of mine, I had ran into him at a Kroger shopping grocery store. I said, "Oh, Chris, hey man, I haven't seen you in a while." He's like, "Yeah, I just got out of rehab." And he said, "What you been doing?" So, well, I've been doing this powdered opiate stuff, not knowing it was heroin, completely naive, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh man, can you give me some of that?" And I'm like, "Dude, you just got out of rehab." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. It's all good. Just a one-time thing." It's like, all right, cool. This is a guy I ran with in high school. We did all kinds
Yep.
of stuff together, right? So we get together and we get in this pickup truck, and he's sitting there like with a fork and knife almost, but it's a spoon and a needle, like he's getting ready to have dinner, right? And I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, this is how I do it." Shit. I said, can I watch? He's like, "Yeah, sure." So I watched him do it, and I wanted what he had, man, when that
Yeah.
happened. So I turned my head, I stuck out my arm, and he hit me with that, and that was it. That was done for. So
So yeah, when you look at your timeline here, in rural America where I'm from, the opioid crisis, heroin was readily available around our cities. Um, the opioid crisis from the synthetic side, it started making its way into pharmacies and all these things. So what I had worked on was a couple of heroin overdose deaths where they couldn't find oxys. And then in reverse, where I had worked a couple oxycontin overdoses where they went out to the rural areas, found the synthetic version, and because they're what you don't know, and just to educate our listeners is sometimes heroin is very very light. It's not a lot of kick, but sometimes it will absolutely take you out of this world. The potencies
yep.
change on that. The oxycontin, um, it was it was produced with a time release. It was supposed to be the coolest thing. It's a time release capsule. And basically all you had to do is get it wet, and that went away.
That's it.
I just lick you lick the coating off of it, spit that out, and then you had a very pure opioid at that point in time.
Yeah, we were injecting it. We started with snorting it, and then eventually now you can inject it. Just put it in a spoon, heat it up a little bit, you're good to go.
Yeah. Those were those were that was I was right there. So I just wanted to I didn't know, like you folks say, no, Patrick and I just connected where he's a guest, and then we're just getting to know each other here. So it's been great for us to kind of fill those boxes in, because we start this which journey for you. You're talking about 19 years old, but you're also your journey to recovery started young. All right, and let's add this. I want to add this other part into heroin's not something that you just take. Most people, heroin's not something you take once and you put it down. Your body becomes addicted to it. It's a very addictive substance. So when you talk about when people talk about recovering from heroin, just that alone is a success. It's a hard process. Your body is addicted to something that it has to have. It's not like beer to where you can drink it and just impulses, hand to mouth, whatever that reoccurs. Your body is actually craving and creating these desires for heroin. So I wanted to tee you up there. So I won't ever. This is not an easy. We're not talking about, hey, I put the bottle down moment. We're talking about heroin here, which is a very addictive substance. But what was that turning point that set you on the path to sobriety?
My parents came home and found me, man. They thought I was dead. I was instructed to watch my two younger sisters while they were off on their typical Friday night bowling league. And it was really out of characteristic for me, the way the whole night had kind of played out. And chances are I kind of manifested it to happen, because I'd been trying for like 6 months to figure out, Jeff, like I got to get clean. Like I can't keep doing this. This is going to kill me. I don't want to keep living this way. So like for 6 months, I'm trying to get the courage to ask for help. I'm like, do I tell them, like you're saying, Oxycontin, do I tell them maybe I'm addicted to pain pills or something else? Like maybe that doesn't sound bad as shooting heroin, right? So they're like, watch your sisters. We're going bowling. Yeah, okay, no problem. And it was very uncharacteristic for me to be in the living room, in this bonus living room we have, on the couch, with all my paraphernalia out, needle, spoon, belt, everything. And I'm tying one off and shooting one up in the open like that. I mean, it's very uncharacteristic. Normally I would have done it in the bathroom or in my own bedroom, but here I am. And I went out, and I wake up to my dad shaking the hell out of me, just shaking. And my mom's in the back behind him, screaming, hollering. And I don't even know what's going on, right? I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they, obviously ripped into me. put me to bed. I wake up the next morning. I'm like, what the hell happened? I'm like looking for my stash and I'm like, okay, it's not here. I'm like, did that really happen last night? Like, this is crazy. I go walking downstairs and my mom's on the kitchen landline calling rehabs. And I'm like, oh man, this happened. But at the same time, I had that relief. And you being in law enforcement, you've busted a lot of guys. Some of them probably told you the same thing. That relief. I don't have to run. I don't have to hide anymore. I can be myself now. I don't have to be this other person I've been trying to be. So I had that huge relief. And that stuck with me, man. That like, except for a couple instances when I was in rehab where I kind of was like, I don't want to do this. I want to leave and go get high. Aside from a couple instances like that, I knew I was done because I've been wanting to get done. And I was put in the right position the whole way. I had all the right people put in my life in that whole early journey that just set me up, man, for success.
That's
so cool. Like, if I didn't really want it, I would have failed. But I really wanted it, man. Like the recipe, everything was set up. All the ingredients were there. Somebody like me to grab a hold of this thing and to just fly with it. So,
all right. So let's look at demographics. You've already mentioned, because it's easy for everyone to think, mom wasn't there, dad's in the picture, Patrick's off, whatever. I heard mom and dad. We got mom and dad in the picture.
Yeah, man.
So,
middle class, suburban family. Dad's hard worker, mom's hard worker. I'm from South Florida originally. We moved to Augusta, Georgia in '96 when I was 13, which, at that time, there's nothing there but the Masters once a year, right? We have one week out of the year. Otherwise, Augusta's a dead, quiet place, right? That's changed since then. But yeah, man, I mean, financial troubles my parents had, but they always got by, man. Like, we never needed materialistically. Like, we didn't have everything we wanted or needed, but like, we always had presents. We always had, power never got shut off. Parents were married. They sensed divorce, but at the time they were married until I was like in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
Married again, two younger sisters. So they're like kind of, married couple, 3 kids, dog, cat, both have jobs, cars in the garage, nice 2-story brick home in Augusta, Georgia.
Did you stumble into this through friends, or how did you get introduced to heroin?
Well, like I said, I mean, it started really young for me, like cigarettes and weed at probably 10, 11 years old when I was still living in Florida. And,
really?
And, maybe that's because of some childhood stuff, but, I was always looking for something, right?
Yeah.
And that turned into alcohol, lots and lots of alcohol, all the drugs, man. As soon as I got my license, Jeff, in high school, I barely did a full day of school. I was always skipping school. I always had something I was under the influence of. And, I remember the first time I took Percocets for the first time, drinking a bunch of beer and taking Percocets. I feel like I was floating on cloud 9, man. I had found what I'd always been looking for. So I just kept searching and searching for that, kind of subconsciously, like not really knowingly doing that.
Yep.
And then, like I said, I got introduced to the OxyContin. Sounded kind of scary, but the other kids were doing it. Of course, not a lot of kids, but of course I'm running with the wrong crowd, right? And so I just kind of got into it. And then before I know it, somebody said, hey, I was so naive at the time, which is funny looking back. They're like, hey, I have this powder crushed opiate stuff here in this little baggie. And I'm like, oh, all right, cool. This guy's brother or brother-in-law was selling it. So I bought a little bag and it was heroin. I didn't know it was heroin. And then, like I told you the story in the beginning, I ran into my buddy who had experience with that, just got out of rehab and was off to the races. And as soon as I did that first shooting up ordeal, I had to put anything and everything into a needle, man. Like any pills, Ativan pills, it did not matter. Any kind of opiate pills, I had to put it on a spoon and cook it up. As ridiculous as it was, as sloppy, as nasty as it was. And it turned into, the bathrooms, using toilet water, shooting up in parking lots. I was going to school at Augusta State University, shooting up in the parking lot before going into class. Just ridiculous stuff. Selling it, trying to hide from people like you, seeing people like you nearby, paranoid I'm being watched. And I'm doing all this stuff, man. Again, I'm a middle-class white kid, right? Driving down into the hood of Augusta, copping dope, got people on my butt. We're talking about, do we hold these guys up at gunpoint because like we don't have money, we're dope sick. You've heard all the stories, and a lot of my buddies gotten a lot of stuff, man. I just wasn't there on those occasions that a lot of stuff went down. God just kept blessing me along the way, man. I just kept getting blessings along the way. Like all the should have happened, and they didn't happen. I sat in the back of a couple cop cars, but just never got booked, never went to jail, got out of stuff. So that's kind of like how that went. Like,
Yeah.
when you look back, it doesn't make any sense.
No, like being on the other side of it, I mean, I just know the times, right? And I know, I worked around it. It was, I could, like, I was around you. I didn't, well, not you particularly, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was around diversity of you.
yeah.
I was in and around, folks like yourself that are experimenting. And, you know, here's the thing, I don't do that stuff anymore, but I also learned that, you know, it's just, people are like, oh, you don't do the cop or this. I'm like, listen, man, I did a job, and I did a job, and I did my job really well, but that job was not my identity. I mean, I enjoy these conversations and learning about stuff you did, and
Right.
you can learn stuff that we did, right? I enjoy this side of it because, man, I tell you, there's no better way, to help someone than to hear two guys just kind of hashing it out of how you can overcome.
Mhm.
Folks, you know somebody. You know, Patrick has said we're going to continue this conversation for some time here, but you know somebody that already needs to connect with Patrick, and they need to. But just because of where they're headed and where we don't want to be, because you know, heroin's one of those. It got replaced with fentanyl, and you know, there's a
Yeah.
lot. There's no way you can go throughout your day, and sometimes by the hour without hearing that name fentanyl mentioned. And just anything, any conversation that you're having, if you're scrolling social media, you're reading the news, you see that term, and that's where we are now. So it's something that will take you out of this world.
And it's
Um,
in everything now, right? They're
yeah,
putting it in marijuana, they're putting it in cocaine,
yeah,
methamphetamine, they're putting it in little fake looking Xanax pills, they're
yeah.
crushing it in, little Percocets that have fentanyl. And I work in substance abuse as a nurse practitioner. I treat people every day who are where I was. And this fentanyl's, like you said, day after day after day. They're like, oh, do you remember so and so? Yeah, they're dead now. Oh, you remember that
Yeah.
one patient? Yeah, they're dead now. And we have Suboxone now. We didn't have Suboxone very much back in 2002 when I was getting clean. Wasn't really around very much. You kind of heard a little bit about it.
Is
Now,
that a step down, Patrick? Is
yeah,
Suboxone a
yeah,
step?
yeah.
Okay.
It's like lesser of two evils, kind of
Yeah.
a kind of an alternative there, but
Uh,
it's still physically addicting, but it's safe. It's a prescription. You can't get high on it. You can't overdose on it. So it's something we give people to step down. Whereas me, was cold turkey. You were sick.
methadone was on the
Methadone.
market here.
Methadone back then was
Yeah,
a lot more widely used. Yeah,
yeah,
that was being used a
yeah.
lot.
Methadone was a step down for heroin back then. You know, and there's a lot like the overdose part of it's another thing, but just the hygiene, sharing needles,
Oh yeah.
all the other things that comes with that. And I'm not just my experience here, because I interviewed people and talked to people. And they would talk about it, would call it firing it up. And like Jeff, it's like I got, you know, they would use drugs, snort cocaine or snort, you know, whatever. Then when the needle got introduced, you're like, man, I was fine until I started firing it up. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's how they would roll here. That's what they would call it. Like, we fired it up, Jeff. We fired it up. And it got out of hand because their addiction, like, it became too much and it started consuming them because it was so dang good.
It's an
And
obsession.
yeah,
It's
I've
like
had,
once you use that needle, everything has to go through that needle now.
yeah, yeah, that's what he said. I remember very candidly him telling me, he goes, I was fine. And I think even a family member had said, like, you know, him abusing, him using wasn't a big deal until he started firing it up. When he started using his needles, it would change the thing. Do you have, Patrick, do you have any a success story or anyone who's came through while you've been as a substance abuse nurse practitioner? Do you have any a tough case that you know, that's impacted you the most?
I I don't think I've had one. I've had a lot of cool instances where I go back to these detoxes to work, these rehabs, and I go a couple times a week. Some of them I go every day. And I walk in, and I remember this one particular situation. I walked in, and this guy came walking towards me, and he's wearing a uniform shirt representing the facility. And I'm like, Sean, is that you? He's like, yeah, man, I work here now. I'm like, what the hell? This was a guy that'd been in, you know, 20 times, had been into
Yeah.
rehabs. I've been treating him over and over, like, Sean, this is going to kill you, dude. This is going to kill you. I know. I just can't stop. I know. And we would try to set him up, and he had to keep going. And then now he's been working for this program for like 2 years now, been
That's
sober.
awesome.
Like, so that's happened multiple times. first responders like you, veterans like you. I treat a lot of veterans. I
Yep.
work at this one facility in Palm Beach Gardens where we treat veterans, a lot of PTSD, a lot of first responders that come from Chicago, New Jersey, law enforcement. They're on leave. They've had, psychological breaks. They've had
Yep.
bad drinking addictions, drug addictions, sometimes no addictions at all, just mental health issues. So like I've treated a lot of veterans and first responders, which I love doing. And we always kind of go back and forth like you and I are, because they're telling me stories about following people, busting people. I'm like, oh, that was me. So it's a good time.
And I say this every chance I get. There's this. You'll hear it. I'll read it sometimes. And I have my, I get to do a lot of different things now. But I love keeping up with my law enforcement community and my friends that are still there, the young kids whose dads I worked with that are kids are now on. And I'd read on a post or someone that said, it's like, well, you knew what you were getting into when you took that job. No, you don't. That's a little bit dangerous, but people have no clue how bad our societies have eroded and how drugs and just lack of fatherhood, parenting, all the things, right? But how the stuff that the officers deal with day in and day, firemen, police, military, all the stuff that they deal with, and sometimes in your own community that you take home and when you don't get away from. And when you go to a ball game, you see the people that you're dealing with. When you go to, especially in a rural community where you live where you work and you work where you live, so there's no escape from those moments. So it's good that they're getting down, and it stinks that they're it stinks that they go through that. But folks, I can tell you that there's been a great amount of emphasis and attention that's put on mental health for our public safety and military professionals, and it needs to be there because that job, like we throw a lot of money at those problems, and they had like I thought, man, I'll be 50 or I'm 50 now, and and I grew up in a different time, but I never thought I would sit here and tell you like, man. I thought of all the money and the resources and everything we pour into this stuff. I'm like, man, this stuff will be cured, right? And it is compounded and gotten worse. And we step back, dude.
There's a lot of resources out there too. So many, and like I worked in trauma facilities and hospitals as a nurse my first 8 years in healthcare. So I was on the receiving side of the patients and suicides and car accidents and all the devastation, drowning victims, babies resuscitating that didn't make it. So we had our own horror stories, but I was always putting myself in the first responder shoes going, they're out there in the field in the middle of it. They're bringing it to us in our nice, cushy hospital trauma room. So we're still affected by it too. And luckily I was sober by the time I got into all this. Yeah. So I had my own support network, but we didn't always have really good debriefing and processing and a therapist to come in and talk. So they have all that now with law enforcement, but we're guys, so we're macho. We're not going to take advantage of that. We're just going to stuff it down. And then it comes out in other destructive ways. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're coaching men on dealing with anger, depression, and frustration. What are some of those big challenges that you see men are facing, and how you approach breaking down some of those walls?
Well, it's just like anything else, right? We have to help men be safe and okay with being vulnerable. So how do we do that, Jeff? We have to take the lead. We have to say, I have to strip down first and say, this is me. This is who I am. I have some feminine sides to me. I have some intimacy. I don't have to be 100,000% masculine and macho, right? I box. I've been doing that for like 4 or 5 years. I've had boxing matches. I play sports all my life. Like I'm a guy's guy too. I fish, I boat, I do all the stuff, but I also can be sensitive and intimate and have that side of me too that helps. So it's about kind of making guys feel okay with like, hey man, if what you're doing isn't working, why don't you try this other side? Try this other little bit. Like your woman is nagging at you all the time, or your parents are on your case all the time. Like you're not the guy you used to be maybe when your woman first met you. So it's about like kind of helping break that down. And for me, I hit another bottom about 2 years ago in sobriety, about 19, 20 years sober, which you might have there in my biography. So I started getting into coaching. I started seeing a coach for the first time. I did therapy, I did antidepressants many, many years ago in my early 20s. And I've been doing the recovery thing. Well, I didn't even know I was like this pot of boiling water ready to spill over, right? And I was exploding, irritable. I was married before, divorced now. So like I've done the marriage and being a jerk and, not being the guy I wanted to be. So I've learned those lessons. And so my goal is to carry that out. And so like, as a nurse practitioner, I can only help you if you live in Florida. As a coach, I can help you all over the world, right? If you have internet access, we can jump on a call here and we can start getting to work. And that's what happened to me. I was working with a coach who was all the way in California. And then I would see her periodically in person. We would like have group retreats and things like that. But I was able to do so much work and get down to like what those core wounds were from my childhood that were affected and permeating into like my entire life. So I was going to continue to have bad relationships. I was going to continue to, choose the wrong people to be my friends because that was the wavelength I was on. So I had to turn that around. And so a lot of that is like, yeah, man, if you look in the mirror, you don't like what you see anymore, let's do something about it. Let's change that. We can fix it, and again, it's okay to cry. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay to not be so macho. Like that's not working, man. Like this is, again, 2024, like, roles are kind of changing and blending a little bit, right? With the wife staying at home and doing all the cooking, like things are kind of changing a little bit. So let's kind of like get on the wavelength with that and ride with it a little bit. And there's times for us to be our masculine selves and get stuff done and, have our purpose driven life and all that stuff.
I think another key to that, folks, is making sure you don't stay in the same circle. Like for your public safety folks, have other friends.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have some friends outside of that because they act as that. They will notice destructive behavior or reckless behavior. They'll notice that a little more than the group that you're around. I ran into that. My normal was not when by the time my now wife came along, my normal was not what she was like. This is not what should be normal. Just because of the lifestyle we were living, the thing, the ride we were on. But John Mattingly, he was a Louisville sergeant, and me and him talked, and he was like he was in a different place. I was a young single guy. He was married with kids, so at the end of his shift, he went home with his family, and he had friends. Like he was at coaching, he was doing all the dad and husband stuff, and I didn't have that at the time. That day, I had girlfriends and all those things, but we burned it at both ends professionally, working as hard as we could, and then we played just as hard as we could. So the folks that are, excuse me, the folks that are they're single that are living, and you hang out with your shift, and your shift ends up doing a lot of stuff together. That's awesome. Don't take away from that, but make sure that you don't do that all the time. I think that's super helpful too.
Yeah. I was going to say it just kind of enables you to stay in that mindset and to kind of commiserate, right? You kind of commiserate a little bit and bitch about work and bitch about the people you dealt with all day.
Yeah. You're spot on with that. But I love the way that you are. Your program is man focused, and it's male, and like you said. But you're also bringing in the spouse or that woman. You're working on a course to help women better understand and support that struggling man. I'll tell you this to tee up this part of the question. Like, I grew up not knowing my dad. I grew up around alcohol. I grew up around a lot of destructive behaviors in my family, and just it's how it was for me. My wife totally opposite, right? She's mom and dad, and they didn't do anything, all the crazy stuff. So when I struggle sometimes, which is not a lot these days because I talk about it more. I have this conversation, and I'm but back when we and a buddy, like if she walked in right now, Patrick, she would be like, why did y'all do that? She would just be mind blown by, she's like, I just don't. Yeah. So when we talk sometimes is she has her own thing, and she's learned more about me and some of my friends that are similar in our destructive behaviors and reckless behaviors. But I think what you're doing there is awesome. So anyway, that's kind of where I wanted to tee you up here for that program that's kind of woman focused to help them have a better understanding of their spouse. But what's one piece of advice you give to a partner that is just trying to help and getting pulled into the struggle?
Yeah, I appreciate the plug. Yeah, pretty soon, today's November 7th, probably within a week or two, I'll have the course out, and
Yeah.
it'll be titled "The 5 Effective Communication Strategies," to talk with the man in your life. I kind of butchered the title a little bit, but that's more or less what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the whole point is, I've had so many women come into me from working with men and in the groups that I'm with, they're like, "Hey, I'd love for my husband to talk to you," or "I'd love for my son to work with you," or I have this nephew that's struggling and they just don't see it. So the biggest thing, like 100%, is, don't pressure, don't nag, lead by example. Is just keep doing your thing. And I always tell them, invite him to do something with you. If you're going for a walk, if he's being, quote, a lazy slob and he just goes to work and sits on the couch all day till he goes to bed, invite him to go for a walk with you around the neighborhood. Like, just little things at a time, kind of lead by example, pull him along a little bit. So it's not really one overall arching theme other than you can't pressure him to get help, right?
Yeah.
Until he hits his own bottom, he's not going to be ready. Until I hit my bottom with addiction, I wasn't ready. Until I hit my bottom 2 years ago with anger, frustration, flying off the handle. And really what it came down to at the end of the day, lack of self-love, lack of self-care. I didn't love myself, man. I loved my girlfriend. She loved me. But I'm like, how much can I really love another person if I don't love Patrick? If I don't love the guy I see in the mirror, man? And I'd lost that. I didn't even realize it. And so I think that's where a lot of guys like you've worked with and that I work with, that's where they have to get to. Otherwise, they're going to say, quit bothering me, quit nagging me, leave me alone. I provide, I put food on the table. We have the power, doesn't get cut off. Like, leave me alone. What more do you want from me?
Yeah.
And it's up to the women. Sometimes they give an ultimatum. Like, you're not the guy I married. Like, what are you going to do? There's a reason why men don't live as long as women, right?
Yeah.
It's like, let's do something. Let's get healthy. Let's do some healthy habits. And like you said, you gave voice to self-destructive behaviors.
Yeah. You being able to love yourself. My wife did. She told my daughter one time. My daughter was talking about she's low. She's talking about marriage or something other. My wife was like, she says all that's gonna come, but you've got to learn to love yourself first. And she said once you learn to love yourself, everything's gonna come together like it's supposed to. And the other thing I would add to that, Patrick, that I struggled with was forgive yourself. Forgive yourself first.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay to forgive Patrick, because that's just because you're taught that. Forgive and move on. But I struggled to forgive myself for just things I did dumb, things, people I've stepped toes, I stepped on, whatever. And finally, I just said, it'll come up in my brain sometime. I'll acknowledge it. And I'm like, that's not who I am no more. I'm forgiving myself for these moments. So, folks, think about that.
And another big piece of that is also, accepting love, accepting compliments from people. I was so bad about, I didn't know how to accept compliments. People say, hey, Patrick, and I'd go, yeah, but I would just deflect. Because inside I felt I didn't really deserve it. There was some other reason why you were giving me compliments, or you just had an ulterior motive, right? So like once I started accepting compliments and learned how to say, Jeff, thank you.
Thanks.
That's it. Thank you.
Gym member Catherine Warren's her name. I'll name her because she called me out in front of everybody. She was telling me, she's like, how you do this, and I was like, ah. And she goes, your problem is you don't know how to take compliments. And when she said that, I was like, and here's the cool part. I ran into her like a couple months ago, and she's like, hey, how you been doing? I'm like, I want to tell you something. You said something to me one time that I never forget. And she's like, oh God, what was it? And I was like, you told me I needed to learn how to take compliments. And it changed my life, because now I'm like, thank you. And I processed it, and it didn't go in one ear and out the other. I just think, oh, you just go, you don't know who I am. I did. I was like, all right, well, maybe, I'm not doing well at this. And so I really became self-aware. So when people would give me compliments, I made sure that I was like, thank you, accepted it, and not try to brush that off.
Breathe it in. We say milk it, man. Breathe it in, milk it. And at first, I would have to write them down. I would go, oh, the person's compliment. I would write them down. So I would go home and I'd have a list of compliments for the day. And then another thing my coach gave me to do in the very beginning was to compliment myself to my girlfriend, Caitlin. one time every day. So I would come home and she got into it, right? Like a good woman would. And she goes, so what's your compliment for today? And I was like, what do I have? What do I have? What do I have? I did really good at work today. So I had to like come up with something that it got me in the mode of complimenting myself more and more and more. And then again, taking and breathing it in, man, and like milking the good stuff. Cause I could take the negative stuff and really just churn and run with that. But the good stuff, I'm just like, no, get out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah.
So it's made a world of difference, right?
It
Like
does.
you've
I
experienced.
speak like I talked today, and I speak in front of just whatever the size of the crowd is. Or stand up comedy, whatever. Like I just enjoy speaking and talking, conversations like these, and I'll do that now. Everybody like, how did you brought the house down? What'd you do? What'd you do today, Jeff? I'm like, brought the house down
Yeah.
for 8 people, right? It could have been 8,000, but it was still that house is not standing. I do the same stuff or just celebrating my day. And
it doesn't matter if it's 8 or 8,000. You brought the passion, you brought the energy, enthusiasm. That's what matters, because you have to go home at the end of the day and say, did I do my best? Did I really do a good job? Or did I just go through the motions? Because there's only 8 people there. So who cares?
No, it was a good one. But I do, like, I hit at the end of it, everybody's kind of there. And I'm like, how did I do? Did I over deliver? And they're like, oh man, you killed it. I'm like, don't you tell me that, because it's a big deal to me, because I'll bring everybody back in here if we need to.
Do it again.
We'll do it again. We'll do take 2. It's good. Man, it's everybody's like, I had read, I can't remember. I put on a podcast or whatever. That person messaged me back like, yeah, I'm not doing coaches, or I'm not interviewing any more self-help coaches or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But man, I tell you, what people get lost sometimes, Patrick, is your client is going to connect with you because they connect with you. And I've had that happen to me where sometimes out of the blue, like this person like, Jeff, I want to work with you. And I'm like, you don't, this is not so. And he's like, nope, when you speak, you like it. And I remember having those moments myself of it took the right voice at the right time in the right setting for me to have that light bulb moment. And so I appreciate you and what you do. I wanted you to know that. Like it's a busy world of recovering addicts or folks like me that have lived a non-normal life of what other people would say. Yeah. And we're out here just trying to make a difference. But here's what I found: there's not enough of us.
Yeah.
Right?
No, thank you, and thank you for saying that. Yeah. And that was my concern when I started getting the imposter syndrome of, why am I going to get into coaching? It's saturated. I hate using the term. I don't want to use the term life coach or personal coach. It's saturated.
Do not like saying the word life.
Millions of them.
You just gave me it just gives me a chill.
Yeah, it's like, I don't like that, man.
Yeah.
But that's what we do. And like you said, you gave voice to, right? Somebody's going to hear my voice, and for whatever reason, that's going to resonate more than they hear yours, or vice versa. And so if there's billions of us out there, then that's just way more people that have the chance of getting help, because they're not going to resonate with all those other 500 million people. So we need to have 1 billion of us out there so somebody can hear a message for whatever reason. And we do it in recovery too. Like, not everybody's going to, care or listen to what I have to say as opposed to a friend of mine, or the other way around. So, and we're always ready we always, hear it at the right time. Right. And
you're like me. You've been there and done. You got some street cred. Right. You've been like, that's what I felt like. I've been on both sides of law and non. Right? So you've come with some street cred. I remember we were, our son was born. I think our daughter our daughter was a little bitty. And we were I was trying to figure out, I was living, like I always said, didn't worry about debt, didn't catch up on money. My wife is very, very disciplined when it comes to money. And she'd been talking about, like, we need, let's get this paid, let's do this. And I bought a car, and, because we just had our daughter, and I wanted to have something a little bigger. And I remember we were listening to Dave Ramsey. Dave gives, he's a get out of debt master. But, I'd listen to him, and it wasn't him. It was a guest that was on the show. I'm in the shower, and I had it playing in the background. I remember my aha moment with that, and it was the lady's story, and she was the story spoke to me, and I was like, holy crap! If she's, I'm not going to let my family be in this situation anymore. Like, I remember my wife said, we're fixing this right now. You got to, I know I know you think I'm crazy because I say, yeah, I've never said this, but we're going to sit down and figure out how we can work this plan. And we did. But it wasn't Dave. It wasn't Dave's books. It wasn't his videos. It was that story of that person who had been there and done that. That's what spoke to me. And that's what you are.
Sometimes you hear the same thing 100 times, but then that one person says the same thing, and then the others are like, dude, we've been telling you that for how long? It's like, well, I didn't hear it till that person said it.
But I said this 3 times this week. I told my buddy this one time. He's yelling at me because I was doing dumb stuff. He's like, I've told you, and I told you, and I told you. And I go, I didn't say he was wrong. I just didn't want to listen to you.
Yeah. I'm not hearing it.
Yeah, I'm like, I didn't say he was wrong. I just didn't want to listen. All right.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you, you know, I can't pump you up enough about what you're doing. I want us to come back on here in a few, after you get your next program out. I want us to revisit this, and I want us to block some more time because I'd love to hear more about and listen. If you got a success story that wants to come on with us or something like that, someone who wants to help share their message, man, because the stuff that you're doing, you know, is super powerful. And you're the, when I was at my worst, someone was like, Jeff, go see a counselor. And I'm like, no one out there is going to be able to relate with me. Because I can tell you, like, other than going into the military world, it was hard to find a counselor or someone who had been there and done that back then. And you have all that. You have that. So your crutch, if your crutch is nobody's going to understand me, this guy right here, Patrick, will.
Yeah. You want somebody that read it in a book, studied it, or somebody that's lived it, and then now they're doing the same thing and helping other people with it. Yeah. It's pretty simple, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No. And how can folks connect with you? What's the best way before we? And I'll make sure.
Thanks. I have a free webinar masterclass that I did. It's at patrickcaseyjr.com. So patrickcaseyjr.com, and then on Instagram at Patrick Casey Jr. It's Patrick Casey Jr. So those are the best ways to look me up.
If I didn't follow you already, I'll make sure I do that today so we can.
Yeah, please, we'll follow each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And anything I can do to help you share your message, keep doing what you're doing. If you get discouraged, reach out for old Jeff. You got my number.
Cool, man.
Yeah. If you hit your patch, you need that little motivation, let me know and I'll pump you up. But keep doing what you're doing. And I say this a lot with my guests when it fits. You went from probably being a drug dealer to one of the biggest hope dealers.
There you go. Hope dealer.
You're now you've replaced that old lifestyle with giving people hope.
Hope. And it's the most powerful thing. Hope and love, it's the most powerful thing.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for being on.
All right, man. Looking forward to next time.
Yeah, definitely.